Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am Ahmed Mohammed, the litigation director here at CARE New York, the Council on American Islamic Relations. We are the nation's largest Muslim and civil rights organization. In the New York chapter is the only Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization serving the Muslim community and providing free charge legal services here in the state of New York. We are doing this webinar tonight in partnership with Majlis Ashura, and as a host, we have Sister Lamia, who I'll hand over the mic now so she can introduce herself.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Lamia. I am the project manager at Majlis Ashura, the Islamic Leadership Council of New York, and we are an umbrella organization that represents over 90 different mosques and Muslim-led organizations in the metropolitan New York area. We facilitate, represent, and advocate for issues that are concerning to the Muslim community.
Sister Lamia, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for the Majlis Ashura for helping set this up and partnering with us.
Thank you.
This webinar is entitled Understanding the Stimulus Package, Paycheck Program Protection for Nonprofits and Religious Organizations. Before we get started, though, I want to go through some ground rules. Number one, due to the large number of attendees, we have muted everyone so that we can have an efficient and timely webinar. Additionally, we are recording for future episodes so that we can release this more widely later on. So for everyone in attendance, thank you. If you have questions, comments, please use your chat bar. And towards the end of this webinar, we will review the chat bar and do our best to answer every single question. If for some reason you are not muted, even though the system should mute you automatically, please mute yourself right now. Thank you so much. So tonight's webinar is going to cover 4 main topics. Number one, we're going to cover the ins and outs of the Paycheck Protection Program, the ins and outs of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. We're going to review and we're going to learn how to complete the Paycheck Protection application, loan application. And then lastly, Sister Lamia is going to give us an overview of alternative funding resources. Specifically, the Majlis Ashura has been working extremely hard to create an emergency fund for masajids who are going through some financial struggles during the COVID-19 crisis. Now, before we get started, I want to give a quick overview on what the stimulus package is, how it came about to be. On March 27th of this year, Congress and President Trump signed into law the CARES Act. Now, the CARES Act stands for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and it provides for $349 billion in relief for small businesses and nonprofits. That includes funding for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and it created a whole new program called the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. Now the PPP, the acronym, was designed to maintain employees on payroll and to cover some operational costs for small businesses and nonprofits. Now, one thing that we all have to be mindful of, and this is the reason why we wanted to do this webinar as quickly as possible, is that the Paycheck Protection Program is a first come, first served basis, right? So if you wait too long and then apply, there may be no funding left for you to receive, even if you would have qualified. So that is really important. So what we're going to do is go step by step, if that's okay with Sister Lamia, and we're going to talk about the Paycheck Protection Program. And the very first question that we want to clarify for everyone, and we've received this question a lot, is which organizations are eligible for funding? And the Small Business Administration, which is overseeing the Paycheck Protection Program, and Congress have told us that any small business, any 501c3 nonprofit organization, including religious organizations that are 501c3 tax exempt organizations, and 501c3 19 veterans associations or other eligible entities with less than 500 employees are eligible to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, Sister Lamia, yesterday, I believe you asked whether a masjid that is operating but does not have a 501c3 tax exempt status, whether that organization would be eligible to apply for a loan under the Paycheck Protection Program.
Mm-hmm.
So there's been a lot of misconception about this question, but the Small Business Administration has issued guidance on this specific issue, not only for the Paycheck Protection Program, but also for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program as well. Under both loan programs, unlike any other SBA loan program that has existed in the past, religious organizations that qualify as tax exempt organizations are eligible to apply for these loans, even if they do not have a 501c3 tax status with the IRS. Right? So that means for these smaller masajids who may not have applied for 501c3 status, that is okay. The SBA, the law says you still apply, you still are eligible, you qualify, and you should still apply if that is in the best interest of your religious organization. That also means that you do not have to apply through the IRS to get your 501c3 status. And that's really important. I think that opens up the door for a lot of masajids, especially in New York City, the smaller masajids, to apply for PPP funding, the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is, I also want to just mention really briefly here, a lot of the discussion has been on masajids. I want to make it clear to everyone that's watching that tonight, what we are going to do is use universal terms unless I specify otherwise. So anytime we are saying nonprofits, that is going to include organizations like Majlis Ashura, that is going to encapsulate a mosque, that is going to include an Islamic school, that is going to include an organization that is religious but does not have a 501c3 status. It is going to be a universal over-encompassing term. So when we say nonprofits, we are referring to anything that can fit under the 501c3 bracket, okay? That's really important so that we don't get questions later on that say, well, you said mosques, what about Islamic schools? What about organizations like Care New York, right? So they all are going to be encapsulated under the nonprofit terminology for this discussion. So if you are a masjid, if you're a community center, if you're an Islamic school, whether you are registered as a 501c3 organization or not, you are eligible to apply under both the Income Injury Disaster Loan Program and the Paycheck Protection Program. All right. So the next topic that we want to discuss regarding the Paycheck Protection Program is how much funding can my organization receive, right? How much funding am I eligible for under this program? Now, the SBA has released guidance on this issue, and it's really a formula, right? So what you are going to do, the maximum loan amount that you can receive under the Paycheck Protection Program is the lesser of these two. It's either 2.5 times the average gross payroll cost incurred by the organization over the last 12 months prior to the loan. So if you're applying today, you're going to take the average of your payroll cost over the last 12 months, that's going to be your average, and multiply it by 2.5. Okay. Or we said the lesser of, or the lesser of $10 million. Most of us will not get to the $10 million unless you are a very big, small nonprofit, right? That has a large number of individuals on your payroll. The overwhelming majority of us in Muslim organizations will be looking at the 2 times the average payroll cost over the last 12 months.
Ahmed, sorry, we have a question regarding the PPP. Someone's asking whether they provide help or giving loans. Just to clarify, the PPP program is a loan program that you apply through the U.S. Small Business Administration, and you have to discuss with your bank also. It has to be an SBA loan provided bank, which I think you're going to get into shortly. But yeah, it is a loan assistance program, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so the Paycheck Protection Program is a loan program created by Congress specifically to help organizations and small businesses retain their employees and cover operational costs that have resulted because of the coronavirus pandemic. It's a loan program. You will apply through SBA lender approved banks, not directly through the SBA. So I will say, for the questions that are coming up, please continue to input them and we will get to them at the end of once we've covered all of our topics, inshallah. Sister Lamia, I know one topic that is also very, very important for a lot of organizations is a lot of Muslim organizations have independent contractors that they expend large amounts of resources on and depend on. And so one of the questions that comes up in the Paycheck Protection Program application is, do I include independent contractors as employees for the purposes of this loan application, right? Making that payroll cost calculation. The answer is actually very simple to this, and it's no. Independent contractors are not included in the loan calculations for this loan program. And in fact, independent contractors are themselves eligible to apply to get a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program. Now, once you get the loan, the one question that you're going to have is, what is the period of time that the loan given to me can be used for? And that's really, really important, because you want to make sure that you're using the loan when it's intended to be used and for the right purposes, so that you can make sure that you get the full benefit of the forgiveness aspect that we'll discuss later. So the loan can be used for expenses that are incurred by the organization between February 15th, right, so you can even go backwards a little bit, from anywhere from February 15th to June 30th of this year, June 30th, 2020. And what the loan is going to do, it is going to look at an 8-week period. So the 8-week period, starting with your origination date of the loan, is going to determine what is called your covered period, right? The covered period is the 8-week period that your lender, that the SBA will look at to determine whether you are going to receive the forgiveness aspect, right? So that's really, really important, especially the organizations and small businesses that are worried about the the forgiveness aspect, the interest aspect of it as well. And so when you're thinking about getting this loan and making sure that it is forgiven, you want to make sure that you're using the funding for permissible uses. And permissible uses that you can use the Paycheck Protection Program loan for are payroll expenses, health and leave benefits and insurance premiums, mortgage interest, rent payments, utility costs. And so when you're asking yourself, will my organization have to pay back the loan? Well, it depends. You have to follow the parameters that are set by the Small Business Administration. So according to the SBA, you will be eligible for loan forgiveness equal to the amount you spent on covered expenses, the ones we just discussed, during the 8-week period beginning on the date of the origination of the loan, right? That 8-week period, again, is called the covered period, right? So if you spend your loan on covered expenses during the covered period, according to guidance, according to the law, that your loan is going to be forgiven. I want to go into a little bit more detail about what is a covered expense, as we discussed. And really what I want to talk about is the payroll cost, because that is going to be the most important factor for everyone to take into consideration. So payroll cost consists of compensation for your employees. Now, compensation for employees can take a lot of different forms, right? Sister Lamy, you're an employee of Majlis, so you probably have some of these forms of compensation, right? So wages, a salary, commission. If you give your employees commission, that's going to count. Tips, if you're a small business in the restaurant industry. Paid leave is also part of the payroll cost. And that's important, especially now where we have employees who might be on sick leave, they might be on vacation leave, they may be taking medical leave, they may be taking some other form of leave like family leave. And so, that is all an expense that the employer, the organization is paying for, and it fits into the definition of a payroll cost. Payroll costs also include healthcare expenses. Healthcare is very expensive. And so, providing healthcare for an employee as an employer can add up significantly. So that will be included as part of the payroll cost as well. And then lastly, you want to consider the state and local taxes that are being assessed and deducted as part of the, or that are being paid by the employer as part of payroll. And that will also be included. Now, some questions we got before this webinar even started. There was a question about FICA, which is the federal deductions that employer have to deduct from payroll. And really the question, the way I saw it was, what happens to these FICA deductions? And so, yes, the state and local taxes are part of the payroll cost that you're reporting. At the exact same time, however, you need to continue making the relevant FICA deductions from people's payrolls, right? Those deductions are not suspended even while you are doing the 8-week covered period under the Paycheck Protection Loan Program. And that's really, really important. Now, another aspect of all this is, for organizations that have laid off employees or reduced salaries, right? There's some requirements that come in place with taking out a Paycheck Protection Program when you're seeking the loan forgiveness. And we're going to take it in 2 separate steps. Number 1, we're just going to go ahead and answer the question of, as an organization that takes out a Paycheck Protection Program and is seeking forgiveness, can I lay off employees or reduce salaries during the covered period? The answer, it's not a yes or no answer, right? It depends. And I'll tell you, it depends on this. I'll say it this way. If you reduce salaries, if you fire employees, what will happen is the forgiveness amount that you will be entitled to receive will be reduced. And it's reduced this way. The amount of forgiveness is based on you maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and then maintaining salary levels, right? That is the purpose that Congress passed the Paycheck Protection Program, is to keep people employed. And so the forgiveness amount is going to be reduced proportionally by any reduction in employees, or if salaries and wages are decreased for employees beyond 25%. So the program does allow for some room for organizations to reduce salaries, right? But if you go too far, right, by reducing more than 25% of an employee's salary, then you're going to start seeing a reduction in your forgiveness amount, and it's going to be proportional to the reductions or to the employees that you have laid off, right? And so I said we're going to take it in two ways. The second way that we want to kind of talk about this is, if I've already released or reduced my workforce as an organization, do I need to hire the employees back, right? Employees that were let go during the coronavirus pandemic. What I will say is that according to the SBA, reductions in employment or in wages that occur during the period beginning February 15th, 2020 and ending 30 days after the enactment of the CARES Act, right, should not, or I say shall not, reduce the amount of your loan forgiveness if you do this thing, right? It's important. There's an if here, okay? So your loan forgiveness amount is not going to be reduced if by June 30th, 2020, you, the borrower, the organization, eliminates the reduction in employees or the reduction in wages. Right? In layman's terms, you need to hire those individuals back, right, by June 30th, 2020. And if you reduce salaries because you were feeling the financial crisis hit you, then you need to readjust those salaries back to where they were, right? And if you do that, your loan forgiveness amount will not be affected, okay? That's really important. Now, I guess the other question that follows along with this is, well, let's say I don't follow the parameters exactly as written, right? If my loan is not fully forgiven, right, Sister Lamia? You know, let's say 75% of my loan is forgiven. What do I need to pay back? And when do I need to pay it back, right? That's a fair question to have. And so what's going to happen is, if it's determined that the loan has to be paid back in part or in full, the payments on that loan, number one, are going to be deferred by 6 months. So that's a positive aspect of that, right? And then after 6 months, you'll have to start paying back whatever is left over, whatever portion of the loan is not forgiven. Now, right now, the interest rate on these loans is being advertised at 1%. And that's according to information that we have available to us today that may or may not change in the near future. All right, so really important question. And that is, how do I apply for the funding, right? That's kind of one of the major aspects of why we're here today. We will look at an application later on, and we will go through it in detailed fashion, inshallah. So that is really important. Okay, but what I will tell you is you apply for the Paycheck Protection Program through your bank. And to make sure that your bank is an SBA approved lender, you can either call your bank and ask. Right now, what banks are doing is they have created online applications. So for example, if you bank with Bank of America, you want to go to Bank of America's website, and they probably have set up an online application. All right. Now, we want to prepare you as much as we can, right? And one of the important things that you should know is you need documents in order to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. And so documents that you will need are documents really related to proving the payroll that you have, right? Because that's how we said the loan amount that you can get is going to be calculated is through the payroll costs that you have incurred in the past 12 months, right? So documents include, W-2s, W-3s, 940, 941, etc. And of course, you need proof of your organization. You need tax documents. If you have them, if you're registered as a 501c3, please do so. If you are recouping and trying to add health, if you have health insurance for your employees, you want to make sure to get health insurance invoices. What I recommend for everyone that's listening here and that wants to apply for this program is talk to your accountant, right? Your administrator. If you have a CPA, either in-house or individuals who do your taxes during tax time, talk to them for assistance and get these tax documents from those professionals. Now for nonprofits, you'll also need what's called a board resolution, right? So this board resolution is going to authorize your organization for the loan application, right? So in order for nonprofits to be able to do something like apply for a loan, the board of directors has to pass a board resolution authorizing an officer, authorizing the organization to apply for the loan. What we have done after this webinar is we will send you out fact sheets about the loan programs. And in that fact sheet, we will include an addendum that has a sample board resolution that the nonprofits can adopt and pass should they wish to use it for their loan application. Of course, everyone has to remember that for binding board resolutions, you need to follow the rules that are set in your bylaws. Now, unlike other SBA loan programs, the Paycheck Protection Program is really one of a kind. It is special in that there are no personal guarantee or collateral requirements, right? And also there is no requirement that you have to certify that you looked for credit elsewhere and could not get it, which is a normal SBA requirement. So when you go and apply for this application, you will not have to make a personal guarantee. You will not have to, your organization will not have to put collateral down in order to get a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program. It is 100% backed by the US government in this instant. The last question that the last topic I want to cover before we move on to the economic injury disaster loans is how many applications can my organization place? One, okay? You cannot have multiple pending applications. There's one application per organization and that's it. And that also means that you can't double dip, right? The very next topic is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. If you get one program, you can't double dip on the benefits, okay? So if you have already received an economic injury disaster loan, you can still apply for a Paycheck Protection Program, but whatever amount has been forgiven or received through the economic injury disaster loan will be deducted from the Paycheck Protection Program, right? So you don't get to benefit from both. Does that make sense, Sister Lamia?
Yes.
Okay, great. I think she said yes. All right, Sister Lamia, if you have comments, if you don't have comments, I'm going to move on to the economic injury disaster loans. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. We do have a couple of questions. I don't know if you want to address it as part of the PPP part or wait till the end to,
We can, let's wait towards the end.
okay,
Since this is being recorded. We want to make this as seamless as
concise,
possible
okay,
and come back and get a hold of everyone's questions, inshallah.
okay, sounds good.
All right. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is, it doesn't include as many things, right? And so let's talk about who is eligible. So the following, so for you to be eligible for an economic injury disaster loan, a significant aspect of that loan program is that you have suffered substantial economic injury that was caused by a disaster. These disaster loan programs are routine whenever there is an emergency declaration by the federal government in your area. These programs are regularly instituted, for instance, when there is flooding in an area, where there is hurricane, like Hurricane Harvey. And so the disaster here is the coronavirus pandemic, right? And so when you go and you apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, you'll have to put in your location and select the state of emergency that you are applying under. And it will be there under New York, as the whole state of New York has been declared a state of emergency in a disaster area by the federal government. And you have to be a business that has fewer than 500 employees, and nonprofits, similar to the Paycheck Protection Program, are eligible to apply for an economic injury disaster loan. Now, the loan parameters are a little bit different, okay? The maximum loan that you can get through the Economic Injury Disaster Program is $2 million in working capital loans at a rate of 3.75% for businesses. For nonprofits, that rate goes down to 2.75%, and it's over a 30-year term, so similar to a mortgage. Now, payments on these loans are deferred for a year. So payments on the Paycheck Protection Program are deferred for 6 months. Payments under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program are deferred for 1 entire year. Now, approval for this loan is based on credit, and you will have to show tax documents, and the borrowers must allow the Small Business Administration to review tax records, right? So there's some added strings attached to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Now, one of the most attractive aspects of the Economic Injury Disaster Relief Program is there is an emergency $10,000 grant, not a loan, right? The loan is one aspect of the program. Attached to that program is a $10,000 emergency grant that, if you're an eligible applicant, you can receive the $10,000 emergency grant within 3 days of submitting an application. Is that guaranteed? No. There are a lot of issues with these SBA grants, especially given we're in a pandemic and the number of individuals who are applying for them. You are supposed to receive it within 3 days. If you don't hold me to it. Unfortunately, we're in very strange times. Now, the good thing about it is there is no obligation to repay the $10,000 grant. And one of the best aspects of it is to receive the $10,000 emergency grant, you don't have to be approved for the loan program. You can submit an application, for example, and your application is denied, right? Your credit wasn't good enough, okay? You didn't submit the right documents. You will still get the $10,000 emergency grant, and you will still not have to repay that grant amount, right? So that's extremely important. Now, if you apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, like we said earlier, and you have already received the emergency grant under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, that $10,000 will be deducted from the amount that can be forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program. That's very, very important. That is Congress's way of stopping individuals or organizations from benefiting under both programs of that nature. So that's really important. Okay, how do you apply? Unlike the Paycheck Protection Program, applying for the disaster loan is through the Small Business Administration. It is not through your bank. It is not through your credit union. It's not through your local community banking association. You have to go directly to the Small Business Association, and you do it by going to www.sba.gov/disaster, right? So the SBA administers this program. And if you have any specific questions about this program, contact the SBA through their website. That's really important. Now, the last thing I want to discuss before we go into looking at the application is a question that we had before this webinar started, is that I'm worried about interest, usury. What should I do? So I'll say it in this way, right? Muslim organizations and other businesses that are considering applying, but they're concerned about riba, they're concerned about usury, they're concerned about interest, right? Those organizations are directed to speak to their respective religious leaders and institutions for religious guidance. This is a very important question, and I am not the right individual to provide you with religious guidance. You need to go and speak to, your religious institutions that you seek religious guidance from. With that being said, we will provide you with a resource that is from a Muslim religious institution that has reviewed this issue, and they have provided their fatwa on what they think about the Paycheck Protection Program and whether or not it is permissible to apply for. We'll provide you with that information, and we'll let you and your community members, your organization, make the decision for itself. Sister Lamia, actually, let's do a quick change in the agenda. Let's discuss the alternative funding resources that Majlis Ashura has, and then we will review the Paycheck Protection application with our audience.
Sure. So as of now, it's a fundraiser. We are in the process of collecting funds from the community, but our alternative is specifically for mosques, because we understand that mosques are going to be a gray area in this whole PPP program. A lot of times imams rely on donations and they negotiate a salary with the mosque, but obviously with mosque closures, these spaces aren't getting donations anymore from prayer and Jummah services. So this fund that we have created, it's in the process of, collecting donations at the moment. But inshallah, it's our goal that by June or by midsummer that we have an established budget where mosques can then directly apply to Majlis Ashura through an application process. The priority will be given to mosques that are struggling more, maybe more local, smaller mosques that mostly rely on donations for maintenance, for imam salaries and whatnot. So inshallah, within the next 2 months or so, we'll have an application process up and running to hand out grants and loans to mosques directly to get through the COVID-19 crisis, inshallah. So please, I'm going to put in the Launch Good campaign in the message box and just share with your communities, just so that we can raise funds for this project, inshallah.
Inshallah, I hope that goes well. It's certainly a needed fund. We know that the Paycheck Protection Program, inshallah, if your organization moves forward with it, may benefit some masajids, but there will still be a great need for financial resources, especially given the limitations of the Paycheck Protection Program, in that it only covers, it's intended to only cover 8 weeks of payroll and operational expenses. So before we go through the Q&A session, we want to go through very quickly in some cursory fashion, go through the application, and which will be sent to everyone that's attending today's webinar. We're going to go through the application, maybe explain a couple of things with the caveat that, like we said earlier, this is for informational purposes only. And I will tell you, when it comes to an application like this, there are a lot of questions that are up in the air that have not been answered yet, right? So if you are having confusion with a specific question, with a specific area, it is extremely likely that there are hundreds of organizations and individuals that are having similar confusion. And even the banks are probably still seeking guidance on this issue. So the number one place that you can go to get guidance when it comes to the application is your bank. And what we recommend is that you call your local branch. We have been getting reports that calling corporate offices and headquarters has not been working. Instead, the best rate of success is to call your local branch. If you have a specific relationship with a loan officer, call that individual, call that branch, and attempt to get your questions answered that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with everyone here so that we can go through the application together. Please bear with me. All right. All right. Sister Lamia, help me out here on your, do you see the Paycheck Protection Program screen? Okay, great. We're gonna go ahead and just scroll down through it real quick. Now, you may not see the application look like this. If you do it online, it's going to go probably question by question, depending on how your bank has inputted the questions online, so that you don't have to go to the actual branch itself to complete the application. At the very top, we're going to input what type of organization we are, right? If you're a sole proprietor, LLC, here's a category for 501c3 nonprofit. And if you don't fit any one of these, you can select other, okay? You want to put your business legal name. That means that you want to look at what your name that you have incorporated under as a nonprofit or as a business, your business address, if you have a tax ID number, if you're a nonprofit organization, that goes right here, your business phone number, the primary contact email address, and then what is the doing business as or trade name that you have that you are operating under. Look, this portion is extremely easy to complete, but it is extremely important that you do it correctly, because what is happening right now is that the information that's being collected by the banks is very cursory. You're filling out everything that they're asking you. And then what the banks are doing right now, as they are getting more and more guidance from the Small Business Administration, is that they will use the information and they will call you, right, to ask you for additional information, right, additional documents. Maybe you didn't submit all the payroll documents. So if you put a wrong email address, if you put a wrong phone number, you don't put the right contact, somebody who's on the phone, who's ready to answer a phone call, even though he doesn't recognize the phone number, right? Then you're doing something wrong, right? You got to put the individual who's going to have that phone next to their ear 24/7, looking out for the call, okay? It's really important. And so as you can see here, it's really going through a lot of the topics that we covered. You're going to input your average monthly payroll that you have calculated with your accountant, with your administrator, with your CPA team, inshallah. You're going to multiply by 2.5 times, as we said, and you're going to get the amount of the loan that you're applying for. And you need to input how many employees that you have, and then you want to select the purpose of the loan. And be really careful. the purpose of the loan says in parenthetical, select more than one. So you want to select all that apply, right? If you are seeking to pay payroll, you need to select payroll. If you're seeking to pay payroll and your lease or your mortgage interest, your utilities, select all that apply. If there are other things that are not listed here that may apply, by going back to look at the definition of what you can use the loan program for, input that under the other and make an explanation. All right. Now, applicant ownership is going to be for sole proprietors, LLCs, partnerships. As nonprofits, I do not believe you'll have to fill this out. If the option is required under your bank's loan application, what I recommend is that you contact your bank and figure out what it is they want you to put into that field so that you can move on to the next step. These are yes or no questions. These are kind of requirements for the Paycheck loan protection. They're very self-explanatory, and so you will need to answer them. If you answer yes to any questions, then on 5 and 6, actually, if you look down, your loan is not going to be approved. So you will just have to look through each one of these questions. There's not really much that we can say about them. If one of these conditions apply to you, unfortunately, you may not fit into the parameters of the loan. Now, this is really important. Question number 7, especially for organizations that may have employees stationed outside the United States. We didn't discuss this earlier, but when you are doing your payroll calculations, you are only to include the payroll of the individuals who reside in the United States. That's really important. If you have a marketing director who lives in Mexico and resides in Mexico, for example, then the application tells us that that individual should not be included as part of your payroll calculation. So for example, if the answer is yes to number 7, you will likely get a call from the bank to resolve that issue. So number 8 is not going to apply to any nonprofits. So the answer is going to be no all around. Now, of course, one of the things that the SBA program tells individuals is that they must make certain certifications based on good faith. And so those certifications include, in essence, the eligibility requirements that we discussed when we were talking about the overview and the ins and outs of the payroll protection program. Make sure that when you are certifying to these things that they are true, because making a bad faith certification is a federal crime, and it can be punished under federal law, right? So that's really important. Now, for nonprofits, in the board resolution that we will provide as a sample, and it's only a sample, many of these certifications are already part of the board resolution. So you may have to make them again through the application process, but you will need some of those certifications as part of your resolution to kind of provide some fundamental aspects of why your organization is applying for the loan program. And as you can see, it's a very short, it's a very simple loan program. It is exceedingly and substantially simpler than any loan application any of us will probably see in our lifetimes. As you can see, it is a 2-page loan program, and that's it. Very simple, like I said. The hardest part for all of us who are interested is to make sure that number one, we are qualifying for the loan program. And if you have questions about, do I qualify, please seek out an expert who can review your matter, or call your bank and talk to them about your particular situation. CARE New York is also here as well to provide some guidance, inshallah, to the best of our abilities. And of course, please do not wait. If you're interested in this loan program, begin collecting your payroll and your healthcare and your documentation to prove your eligibility, so that you can submit those documents with your loan application. Because like we said earlier, this is a first come, first served basis. If you are interested in this program, we don't want you to be left out. So I'm going to move out of this and go back to our regular screen. And Sister Lamia, I think we have kind of reached the point where we're ready to take questions from our wonderful participants. We will start from the top, and each one of us will, take questions that we are comfortable with, inshallah. Does that sound like a good game plan?
Yes.
All right. We're almost close to the 1 hour mark. We have about 10 minutes left. As I promised when we started this webinar, our portion would end within an hour. We will answer as many questions as we can, including going beyond that 1 hour mark if we should. So inshallah, we're able to do so. And the very first question that I see here is the Paycheck Protection Program providing help or giving out loans? It is doing both. It is a loan program, but if you follow the parameters of the program, the loan is forgiven entirely. Now, the best part about this loan program that we learned after it was created, there's a lot of confusion up front at the very beginning, but alhamdulillah, we were able to get clarification from the Small Business Administration that when forgiveness of the loan happens, not only is the principal forgiven, but also any interest that has accrued is forgiven as well. So if you abide by the parameters, if you do things properly, the entire amount, principal and interest, will be forgiven and you will have to pay $0 back. So the next question that we have here is the payroll cost include 1099 independent Islamic school teachers cost? If I understand this question correctly, this individual is an independent contractor. I take that from the word that I see here, it says independent. If this individual is an independent contractor, they should not be counted as part of the payroll cost calculations when you are trying to determine the maximum loan amount that you qualify for. That individual teacher, who in this example is an independent contractor, has the ability to submit their own Paycheck Protection Program application.
So Ahmed, I actually see a couple of questions regarding 1099 contractors, and maybe like there's a theme that keeps coming up. So rather than going through each one, maybe I can just ask a more holistic question that kind of tackles each of these points. But someone mentioned a question about part-time 1099 contractors. Are they eligible to apply for this loan on their own?
So the loan program does not distinguish between a part-time independent contractor and a full-time independent contractor. Mm-hmm. If you are an independent contractor, according to the Small Business Administration, you are eligible to make your own individual Paycheck Protection Program loan application. And so I would recommend that if someone is interested, that they should apply for the loan program. Does that answer the question completely as you posed it, sister?
I believe so. Someone did ask about part-time. And then there's, this one's not explicitly mentioned, but I'd imagine that it might be on the minds of some. But for independent contractors, usually they get a paycheck from the organization that they're working for. So in this case, would the interest accrued later, or would the loan that they'd have to pay back if not forgiven, would it be from their own pockets, or would their organization foot the cost, or is this something outside the scope of this conversation?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'll answer it in this way. I,
Mhm.
I think I've gleaned where you're going, in that if an independent contractor takes out their own Paycheck Protection Program loan,
Mhm.
then that loan is independent and it operates separately from any organizational paycheck protection loan. And so if the independent contractor fails to meet the parameters of the loan
Mhm.
and does not get the entire amount forgiven, then that individual independent contractor will be responsible for paying back a portion or the full amount, or whichever amount is not forgiven.
Got it. Thank you.
Do we have additional questions? I think a really good question here is, isn't the maximum limit you can spend on expenses other than payroll is 25%? That is absolutely correct. To get the forgiveness, 75% of the loan amount has to go towards payroll costs. That's really important. It's part of the loan forgiveness parameters. So you cannot take a loan and use the majority of it to pay your lease, for instance, or your rent or utilities. The majority, 75%, has to go towards payroll. Again, Congress has made this requirement because the main purpose that they created this program was to make sure that individuals can keep their employment. So it's the primary mission of this program is to maintain employees and to make sure that they are able to get their salaries and paychecks. An individual has asked if this applies to part-time employees. Yes, it does. Once again, we have a brother who has correctly given the parameters for the loan forgiveness. It is that at least 75% of payroll and 25% can go to non-payroll costs. Absolutely. And yes, our executive director, Afaf Nasher, joined us at some point to point out that the term of the loan is 2 years, and there is a provision that allows for prepayment of the loan. Now, obviously, if your entire loan is forgiven, there's nothing to pay back. But if you run into a situation where only a portion of your loan is forgiven and you owe something at the end of the day, you can repay it back all at once, and you will not be issued any type of penalty for paying it in advance. Right? That is one of the strategic ways of eliminating the accrual of interest once you recognize you will not be forgiven 100% on your loan. Okay, Sister Lamia, I think we have a question here that says, if you are a nonprofit 501c3 but have no employees, are you still eligible? I don't know how to answer that question really.
I would imagine that this is another independent contractor situation. I'm not entirely sure, but maybe it's a single person run nonprofit. Maybe it's your income is donation based. Maybe you file a 1099. It really depends on your tax status, I'm assuming.
What I would tell in nonprofits that do not have any employees is and maybe we can discuss this offline. For whoever posed that question, if you can follow up with us offline, more than happy to look into it further. Here is my initial inclination, is that when we are calculating the loan amount, it is looking at payroll. It is looking at a average 12 months looking back, if you've been in existence for that long. If you're a new organization, then it looks to a smaller period. I have not seen anywhere where the loan calculations do not include payroll. So for an organization that may not have employees, it may be best to look at the economic injury disaster loan and get the $10,000 grant that comes with it, that is also does not have to be repaid, because that program, the economic injury loan disaster program, does not look at payroll. It looks to the harm that you have suffered. And I have a feeling that every small business, unless you're in the business of making masks and medical equipment, every small business, every nonprofit has suffered substantial economic harm. I think that's reasonable. And I believe that if you all looked at your organizations, you will come to that conclusion as well. So if you don't have employees as a 501c3, there is no payroll, I would recommend that you review the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. That might be the program for you, but you'll have to make that decision or seek out the expert advice, inshallah. That is correct. The one question we have here is the Paycheck Protection Program only covers 2.5 months max. Well, let me correct myself. It doesn't cover 2.5 months. It covers an 8-week period, right? That's really only 2 months if we're considering that 4 weeks is a month. The maximum loan amount calculation is multiplied by 2.5. So it takes your average and multiplies it by 2.5. But you do not get 2.5 months to use that amount as part of the forgiveness of the loan. You only have 8 weeks. Okay. We have a question here that says, if your 501c3 doesn't pay taxes, what do you do? I'm not sure what the question is asking. What I will say about taxes is that as a 501c3, you do not pay income taxes, but 501c3 organizations that have payroll continue to pay employment taxes like FICA. I hope that answers that question. Okay, we have a question here that says, I submitted the application for the PPP. One of the questions was, how much do you own of the corporation? I answered 100%, because when I answered 0, it declined and told me that I have to own at least 20%. I assume this question is for Masjid, not for me correctly. I'm not really sure what type of category you selected in the application. What I will tell you is that we're happy to review that question more carefully and inshallah include it in an email that we'll list out. But what I would recommend to anyone that's having trouble with the application is to call your bank. They are the ones who will be reviewing the application, and so you should call them to make sure that you input the correct information. The application that we showed you, obviously what the SBA is doing, it is not making specific applications for each organization, right? For 501c3 and small businesses, it's one application that's been kind of combined together. So when you do that, every once in a while, there's going to be a significant amount of confusion. I apologize, we're running a little late. We have a lot of questions here. We're trying to do our best to cover as many as possible. Sister Lamia, please jump in whenever you'd like to answer one of these questions. It says here, what happens if our organization runs out of money to pay employees during the covered period before we receive the loan proceeds, but employees? That is a very good question. Our understanding is that these loan applications are supposed to have a very quick turnaround time. According to Congress, that turnaround time is supposed to be about 3 days, which means that if the program is working properly, you apply today, which is Tuesday evening, should have your funds by Friday. Now, obviously, with the high rate of applications, there are a lot of systems that are crashing right now, and the system is trying to work out a few kinks. It is taking significantly longer. But I don't know what you should do. I think that is more of a business decision that you have to make for yourself. But if you have applied, what I would tell you is I would make sure to continue to call and communicate with your bank to make sure that you provide them with all the documentation that they need to review and approve your application. It is really important. You're not hassling anyone, you're following up, because this is important issues that we're dealing with. This is payroll. Individuals have to be able to put, food on the table for themselves and their families. That's a very important question.
Yeah, if I could just add, I would also recommend that you try to fill out the application ASAP, because it did open officially last Friday, and I believe it is a competitive first come first serve type thing. It's not an unlimited amount of money that the government's giving out in loans, so do try to fill it out as soon as you can.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I'll say this, one of the silver linings to this first come first serve is that right now, small businesses and nonprofits, their window has opened up. Sole proprietors and independent contractors, I believe the application process for those individuals is going to open up on April 10th. So there's a 1 week gap. And I got to tell you, $349 billion sounds like a lot of money, but there are a lot of organizations that are hurting. There are a lot of individuals that are struggling right now. I got a feeling that that bucket of money is going to go very, very, very quickly, but it's still there right now. So if you're interested, you can still take advantage of it, inshallah. Okay, so a brother here is asking, is the webinar going to be available to watch later on? I believe we are recording. Inshallah, our recording is successful, and we will do our best to make it accessible to individuals in the future. Okay. Sister Lamia, somebody here is asking, are cleaning, maintenance, lawn care, utility expenses covered for PPP? And I will answer that with yes, I believe so. It does not go into specific details as this individual has about lawn care, but utilities are included and operational costs are included. Just remember that 75% of the expenses over the 8-week period, that is your covered period, have to go towards payroll. So you want to make sure that you're keeping in within those parameters. Oh, and yes, Sister Lamia already answered that question. I see here on the chat. Very next line.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I need to make a correction. When it comes to the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, you do need to make the application to get the $10,000 emergency grant, but you do not have to be approved for the loan. So for example, if you submit the application, you will immediately, within 3 days, get the $10,000 as a grant. If your application is denied, you keep the $10,000, it's forgiven, and that's the end of that, okay? So you do have to make an application. Okay, And I think we shared the link to the SBA disaster application. And like we've said earlier, we will share this information in a fact sheet that includes links to applications. So it asks, one of the questions here is, why doesn't the loan amount include the cost of the rent and utilities? Why does it only include average payroll costs? How do they account them then for all the other expenses? That is a very good question. Unfortunately, that is the way the program was written. I believe that those other expenses were accounted for in the fact that when you get your average payroll cost, you're multiplying by 2.5 instead of just 2, right? And then that also tracks what Congress has said here, in that when you are using the loan amount, 75% has to go towards the payroll. So the main purpose of this program is towards covering payroll, with a small slice for operational expenses. Unfortunately, that is the program that's been created. But inshallah, there'll be future programs to cover additional operational expenses, because we understand and we know that rent and utilities sometimes could be some of the most expensive costs that an organization has to incur, especially in New York City, where real estate prices are astronomical. There's a question here that says, if the organization gives the imam a stipend, should they include a salary?
Yeah, I'm guessing this is directed towards our Launch Good campaign, Shura New York's. So for that question, we still haven't determined the exact parameters of how we're going to go about handing out these grants and loans, but I think it will be a need-based application from each mosque to our organization, detailing the average salary that imams get, maybe including mosque maintenance, and just a general package of what mosques require and how much they've lost during the period of coronavirus closures and the suspension of prayer services.
That's excellent. The next question we have is, someone is asking, how do you apply for more than the $10,000 for the economic injury disaster loan? We have posted in this chat, and we will send it via email, the link to the disaster application, including the parameters. You can apply for more than $10,000. The $10,000 is an emergency grant that is forgiven. But the economic injury disaster loan program allows for loans up to $2 million. Someone has asked about the 1099. We'll repeat what we said earlier. Assuming 1099 is in reference to an independent contractor, they will have to complete their own Paycheck Protection Program application, and independent contractors cannot be included as part of the payroll costs that you are calculating. Excellent question here about once you are granted the loan, how do you go about applying for loan forgiveness, and what is the timeline for that? Yes, so the timeline, we'll cover that issue real quick. The timeline for the loan forgiveness, that when we are looking at to determine whether you qualify for loan forgiveness, is the 8-week period starting with the date of the loan origination. You're going to count 8 weeks from that period. How you go about getting the loan forgiveness is you will make the request through the lender that has given you the loan.
Yeah, I got stuck.
Yes, an individual here has asked, can you provide examples of why we make might not satisfy the loan forgiveness parameters as independent contractors. Unfortunately, I don't have any examples except to say that if you use the money for purposes that are not part of the covered expenses. An example that is really easy is if you take the loan amount that's given to you and you decide to buy a luxury vehicle with it, or you decide to invest it in the stock market, or you decide to do something that's that's outside of the covered expenses. I'm not too familiar with how independent contracting works, but you want to stick to the definition. That's the best answer I can give you on that perspective. If you have a specific question on whether using funds in the specific way fits into the loan forgiveness program, that is something that we will have to analyze specifically given your specific situation. And it's not something that we can answer in general in an informational session, unfortunately. Can you apply for more than one loan? Depends. You can certainly apply for both an economic injury disaster loan and a Paycheck Protection Program. Again, however, the forgiveness aspect of it, if you get forgiven for the $10,000 under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, that $10,000 will be deducted in the amount that you can be forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program, so that you are not double dipping off both programs. If the reference is, can I apply for more than one Paycheck Protection Program? The answer is no. You can only do one application per organization, per independent contractor, per business, per individual. Very good question here as well. The question reads, is it correct that the Paycheck Protection Program is a loan that is forgiven, but the economic injury / disaster loan is not forgiven? The answer is it depends. The Paycheck Protection Program is a loan that can be forgiven if you follow the parameters. It can be fully forgiven, principal and interest. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program has a grant component that is forgiven. It is entirely possible for an organization, for a small business to request and receive only the $10,000 under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. If that is the case, then yes, that entire loan in essence would be forgiven. If you get more than the $10,000, obviously, there is a cap in how much can be forgiven, is the best way to put it. We have a very specific question here. Does a canceled annual fundraiser constitute economic harm for the 10K grant under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that specific question. That will be a question that we will have to review, or you will need someone to review your particular situation to give you a reasonable response to that, unfortunately. For that individual, they are more than happy to contact us offline. And if we have the capacity, we will certainly do our best to give an adequate response, inshallah.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure about the answer to that question either, but because a lot of nonprofits do rely on fundraisers for their primary stream of revenue, I'd imagine that yes, it should count, but then again, I'd still confirm with a bank or the loan provider.
Yeah, I would as well. My inclination is also in that direction. But like I said, it's too specific for me to provide any type of guidance on in this forum. But inshallah, we can follow up. The very next question is, in case of hiring in 2020 employees, can you use that toward payroll to have the loan forgiven? I'm not sure what exactly that question is getting at. Sister Lamia, if you understand the question in more detail,
Yeah, I don't understand entirely either, but I think what he's asking is, if you hired employees in the year in 2020, obviously it's not like a whole 12-month period that you're looking back on in terms of averaging the cost of the past 12 months. So could that be used towards the payroll protection program?
so if I understand the question correctly, the amount, the loan proceeds, once you receive the loan, has to be 75% has to be used towards payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Which employees you're applying this loan proceed to is, I believe, up to the organization / business. The calculation of how much you will get as part of the loan is not looking forward, right? It is not how many employees you plan to hire in the future. It's looking backwards. So no matter what, when you're determining how much is my maximum loan that I can receive, it's going to be something that you're looking in the past, in the rear view mirror, to determine that amount, not in the future. That is the best way I can answer that, given the ambiguity. If the employees of the nonprofit already filed for unemployment, can the organization still apply for the Paycheck Protection Program? Yes, absolutely. You can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, count those employees as part of your payroll, the average payroll for the past 12 weeks. Now, to maintain and meet the parameters of the Paycheck Protection Program, what you will need to do by June 30th, 2020, is to rehire those individuals back and start using the loan proceeds. You're going to use the loan proceeds to rehire those individuals. That's the purpose for organizations that have laid off individuals due to the financial crisis. One individual here asked, to get the loan, you have to have some form of payroll. My message is based on donations and all the leadership works pro bono. Would we still qualify for the loan in theory? That is a very good question, and I recognize there are a lot of masajids, Lamia would know better than I do, that fall under this category. Without putting Lamia on the spot, I will say two things. My understanding is for the Paycheck Protection Loan Program, you do need some sort of payroll. I will review that provision once again when researching, when reviewing, when familiarizing myself to the best of my abilities. The lack of payroll for organizations was not something that I was particularly researching. My understanding is, yes, there needs to be a payroll. If you do not have a payroll, look into the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which does not have a payroll requirement. And then, of course, we discussed the alternative funding sources that the Majlis Ashura is having. And Sister Lamia, please tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. We're aware that a lot of masajid don't rely on payrolls. They're completely donation-based from Jummah and other prayer services, which obviously is now suspended. So currently we are in the midst of fundraising for struggling mosques during COVID-19 closures. And it's our hope that when we reach our goal of $100,000 from donations from the public community, that we can start to hand out these grants and loans to mosques in need who need to pay their imams, who need to work on mosque maintenance, cleaning mosques, whatever costs are associated with protecting these houses of worship. So we're gonna create an application process, a need-based application process, hopefully inshallah in the summer. So yeah, just please keep following our page, shuranewyork.org, and our social media to see where we are in this.
That's great. And we wish you the best. I hope that you raise a lot of funds so that masajids are able to get that grant funding. To go back to the questions, I don't know why, but this is good news. For some reason, every time we finish a question, 2 more pop up. So hopefully we're doing our jobs properly. This question here asks, can you not accept a disaster loan if you only want the $10,000 grant? If you feel that is best for you and your organization or your business, you absolutely can only apply for the economic injury disaster loan and get the $10,000. Absolutely. An individual has asked us to clarify if 2.5 times, which covers 10 weeks, but since the coverage is only for 8 weeks, does that mean that 2 weeks worth of money will need to be returned? Or do we keep it and pay interest on it? No, I think that the additional 2 weeks of average payroll is calculated in there so that you can use it for operational costs such as rent, utilities, and stuff of that nature. As we said, the loan forgiveness parameters is that 25% of the loan can be used for things other than your payroll costs.
Yeah, just to clarify, that means you can use 100% of it on payroll costs. At least 75% has to be used on payroll costs. The other 25% is optional for non-payroll related.
Yes, yes, that is, in theory, that can happen. Someone asked a very good question. It says, if the bank denies the application, can you apply again using another bank you have an account with? I don't see why not. I don't see any parameters that prevent someone from reapplying. You just cannot have more than one pending application. I will tell you right now, the way the banks have structured these applications is that they have given a preference. And right now, as it stands, they're only allowing individuals who have a pre-existing business relationship with the bank to apply for this program. So for example, if you bank with Capital One, if Capital One still exists, I'm not aware. If you bank with Capital One and you go tomorrow, open an account with Bank of America, right now, Bank of America will not allow you to apply for the application. Right now, for instance, I know Bank of America says that you have to be a pre-existing customer as of February 15th. Those individuals are going to get the preference. We believe that once the initial wave of applicants happen, that will start to loosen. To apply for the economic injury disaster loan, you're going to do it through the SBA website, which is sba.gov/disaster. Okay, we have a very specific question regarding salary and covering expenses for the imam's house, which is on the mosque property. I will tell you that you should speak with your tax accountant / CPA / administrator to figure out what goes into payroll.
I believe the answer to that question is yes from a previous webinar that I attended. But yeah, I'd still confirm with whoever you're doing your loans through, through an expert, but I believe the answer is yes. It can be considered under utilities.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I think we're down to our last 3 questions. So inshallah, we'll be done very quickly. One individual has asked us to please review how to calculate the maximum loan amount eligibility for the Paycheck program, the Paycheck Protection Program. Yes, we will do that really quick. What you do is you're going to look back in the previous 12 months and you're going to take the average payroll costs. So you're going to add up your last year of total payroll, divide that by 12, you're going to get your average monthly payroll cost, and you're going to multiply that by 2.5. And that will give you the maximum loan amount that you can apply for, that you would be eligible for. Okay, next question says, what specific documents need to be submitted with the 2-page PPP application? So you will need documents depending on what you are seeking to include as part of the payroll costs. So you will need your W-2s. And in essence, you will need documents to prove up your average payroll costs. And that's the best way I can put it. What I will do is in the email that we will send, it will include a little bit more detail on the documents. I don't want to go through every single document here. It'll take a little too long. You'll also need, if you have, for instance, a 501c3 organization, you will need your tax exempt documents. Aside from that, I would direct you to talk to your lender and see what documents, what other documents they are requesting to review and approve your application. And obviously, as we mentioned earlier, if you're a nonprofit, you will need a board resolution. And if you're a corporation, by the way, you'll need a board resolution as well. It will just look a little different. What is the starting point of the 12-month look back period? Is it prior to 2/15/2020? Unfortunately, I do not have the date on top of my brain right now. We will we'll look into that and verify that information unless Sister Lamia has that. No, okay, we'll move on.
Assuming it's probably from the day that you apply for the loan, looking 12 months back, but I'm not sure.
We will review that question and inshallah provide an update to that. When can you apply for the SBA disaster loan? Right now. And you can apply till the end of the year, actually. Of course, remember with any of these loan programs, the application process may be the time period to apply may look like a long period, but if the money runs out, then your application gets denied. So for the SBA disaster loan program, you can apply until December 31st, 2020 is my understanding. There is $10 billion that has been provided in the CARES Act for this program. So you will be able to apply in reality until that money runs out. I'm not sure, I don't recall what this question is referring to about the certification of faith-based. I apologize if it was very confusing. Inshallah, through answering these numerous questions, we've been able to shed some light into that. If you're still here, brother, please try to clarify your question. Okay. This says, how can you check/follow up on a SBA disaster loan? I believe if you're doing a SBA disaster loan program, you will create an account at sba.gov, and you will be able to check the progress using the website on the sba.gov page. To check the progress on a Paycheck Protection Program, please speak to your lender, and I would advise everyone to speak often to that lender until your application gets approved, especially right after you apply, to make sure to get on the phone with your branch to make sure that you have provided all the information and documents necessary to process your application. The very last question that we have here is, can a 1099 apply for SBA loan disaster? I believe they can. Like I said, that will be provided in more detail in the fact sheet. And inshallah, if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Once again, our contact information for CARE New York is 646-665-7599. You can email us at info@care.com. I'm sorry, info@ny.care.com. Make sure to email the New York chapter. And so inshallah, this has been extremely helpful. Sister Lamia, do you have any closing words before I close us out?
Same. If you have any questions for Shura New York, feel free to email info@shuranewyork.org. And New York is spelled out, not NY. So info@shura, spell out newyork.org.
Well, thank you everyone who has attended this, this webinar. Thank you to Sister Lamia and the Majlis Ashura for partnering with us. We're very grateful to have your partnership. May Allah keep you financially strong and helpful and safe, and that you continue to serve the Muslim community in wonderful ways. We wish you the best of luck in your funding for masajids as they go through financial difficulty. This has been a webinar regarding understanding the stimulus package, the Paycheck Protection Program for nonprofits and religious organizations. Once again, I'm signing off here. My name is Ahmed Mohammed. I'm the Litigation Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, New York chapter. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.